I get requests to review a lot of audio gear. Some of it I'm interested in. Some of it I couldn't care less about at a personal level. And I don't really know where the Topping DX5 Mark II sits within that continuum. I wasn't excited to try this one, but I was a little bit curious. The original DX5 was a solid DAC and headphone amp. Shenzhen Audio offered to send me the new Topping DX5 Mark II, and I knew that a lot of you were interested to know more about it. So I said yes, on the understanding that, as always, Shenzhen Audio have no influence over the content of this video. So am I pleased or disappointed that I took on the review of the DX5 Mark II? I'm not really sure how to answer that just yet, but let me talk it through with you and we can work it out together. First up, I don't know that I love the design of the DX5 Mark II, which from now on I'm just going to refer to as the DX5, but in this video when I say DX5 from here on, I always mean the Mark II version. I understand that Topping are creating a sense of visual consistency with their product, a common design language to use a more jargony term. The new DX5 looks like a shrunk down version of the Topping A900 headphone amp with a DAC built in, and that's a good thing. On the other hand, this design, in a little compact case, looks a little bit bland and a little bit busy to me. Aesthetics aren't a big factor for me in whether I like or don't like audio gear, and so it doesn't influence my overall opinions on the DX5, but I was aware that I didn't love the look of it. However, I do love the interface. It's essentially the same interface from the Topping D70 DAC and the Topping A70 amp that's also appeared on other Topping devices potentially before and definitely since the Topping D70 and A70. That means you're getting a very clean and easy to navigate menu system with some fantastic features built in, including a parametric equalizer. It's a shame that all of the EQ settings in terms of the frequency adjustments have to be made on an external computer-based app, but it's very easy to use, and you can also control the selection of the EQ settings from the application itself, so as you're making changes and maybe comparing different settings, you can switch back and forth all within the app without having to interact with the device at the same time. You can also import a frequency response measurement and a potential target curve if that's what you want to do, all to make it easier to get your EQ settings just right. Now, I haven't played with the Topping Tune app very much because I'm not really a big EQ user, but I think these are fantastic features to have for those of you that do like to use EQ. And as another little bonus, you can use the Topping Tune EQ app to export the filter settings to use in other devices, like maybe a portable music player. And so the physical design of the new Topping DX5 is okay, and the interface and menu system is excellent. I'd describe the connectivity options as sitting somewhere in the middle. You've got a good range of connection options on the back here, but I'd describe them all as everything that you would expect. So there's no bonus points here. You've got optical, coaxial, USB-B that can also be switched to UAC 1 mode for use with consoles. And you've also got a Bluetooth input with the high quality codecs like LDAC and aptX. There is no aptX lossless yet, that's still pretty rare, but you've got aptX adaptive, aptX HD, all the good stuff's in there. Also on the back, and this is pretty cool for a small device like this, you've got 12-volt trigger in and out, meaning that this can be switched on by an upstream device like a streamer, and that this can switch on downstream devices like, say, a power amp. There are also XLR and RCA outputs, which can be fixed line outputs or variable line outputs at your choice. That means this is going to be a great option if you're going to feed these line outputs to active speakers, power amps, integrated amps. You've got all the choices you could want. And so, as I said, it's everything you'd expect on the back, and probably nothing that's a surprise. Compared to the SMSL RAW-MDA1, which is probably the closest direct competitor to the DX5 Mark II, the Topping DX5 is probably a little bit under-spec'd here. The MDA1 has more inputs, it's got a pair of optical and a pair of coaxial inputs, and it doesn't lose anything compared to the DX5. The MDA1 also has USB-C input instead of USB-B on the DX5, and so depending on the inputs you need, the MDA1 might be a better choice straight away. On the other hand, on the front of the DX5, it gets another win over the MDA1, and that's because it's got both XLR and 6.3mm and 4.4mm headphone outputs, along with, as we've already talked about, what I think of as a better interface. And a part of the superior interface from the DX5 is these physical buttons down here. These make it far easier to interact with and adjust your settings than trying to do everything through the single control knob on the MDA1. And if we come back now over to the headphone sockets again, we find another advantage that the DX5 has over the MDA1. The DX5 is a proper balanced headphone amp design. The SMSL RAW-MDA1 does have a 4.4mm socket, but it's what I'd refer to as a convenient socket because it's still connecting to an unbalanced headphone amp stage. However, we'll see in a moment if that actually translates to better sound from the DX5 because it doesn't always work that way. What I can tell you for now is that the two balanced outputs from the DX5, the 4.4mm and the 4-pin XLR, do sound a little bit crisper and a little bit more detailed than the 6.3mm socket on the DX5. The sound from the 6.3mm socket is not at all bad, but you can hear that the circuit's been optimized for the balanced outputs, and so that's the circuit I would use if you can. And on that note, whilst most people will never ever need it, the DX5 can output vastly more power than the MDA1 can. And again, that's thanks to the DX5 having a balanced headphone amp design. Having two separate amplification circuits, one for the positive and one for the negative connection to your headphones, means that you can generally generate twice or more than twice the power compared to something like what's in the MDA1. And the new DX5 can output 6.4 watts into 32ohm headphones. The unbalanced output from the DX5 is also still good for 2.2 watts into 32ohm headphones. And that's just a little bit less than the maximum 2.5 watts available from the RAW-MDA1. So basically, both devices will power whatever headphones most of you will ever use with no issues at all. But if you do have one of the 2 or 3 truly power-hungry headphones on the market, and or if you use buckets of EQ, the DX5 is going to give you the extra power to play with. And if you're confused about balanced circuits versus unbalanced circuits and power output and how much you do need, don't need, what your specific headphone needs, there's now a way that I can help you by answering your specific questions. Just visit Minect and search for me, Lachlan Fennon. You can then ask me to answer your specific question as either a text message, a short video recording, or we can book a one-on-one video call together. It is a paid service so that I can prioritize responding to those questions through Minect over all the other communications I get every day, but I've set my rates to the lowest possible option that Minect will allow to make it as accessible as possible. Alternatively, you could just join my Patreon and then DM me through Patreon or over on the private Discord server for Patreon members. That's all up to you, and so whatever you need, if I can help, come and chat to me and I'll try to answer your questions for you. For now though, let's get back to the DX5. And at this point, things were tilting a little bit in favour of the DX5 over the SMSL RAW-MDA1, but the big test was always going to be sound quality. Both of these devices use exactly the same internal DAC design, in the sense that they're both using a pair of ES 9039 Q2M DAC chips. Running both devices as DACs, going out to an external speaker setup using the Burson Soloist Voyager preamp, the Burson Voyager Timekeeper monoblocks, and the ProAC Response D2R speakers, revealed a very, very tiny difference between these two. One of them sounded just the tiniest touch smoother, but it was really impossible to tell that there was a difference unless I was paying very close attention as I switched between them. And I didn't know which DAC I'd connected up to which input on the Burson Soloist Voyager, so this was essentially a blind test and me trying to work out which DAC I thought was the slightly smoother sound. And then it was only at the end that I discovered that it was the SMSL RAW-MDA1 that had that very slightly smoother sound compared to the DX5. And I wouldn't say it was better, just that I could hear a very slight difference. And that meant that everything would come down to the quality of the headphone outputs on these two devices. We had the truly balanced DX5 Mark II up against the unbalanced RAW-MDA1. Now, of course, all EQ settings were switched off for this test, and the RAW-MDA1 doesn't offer any kind of EQ, so factor that in for your decision making if it's relevant. But the MDA1 does have a thing called sound color mode, where you can just add a little tiny touch of coloration to the sound, so I made sure that that was all switched off too. And as I listened, the the RAW-MDA1 once again delivered a very slightly smoother sound. The differences here were a tiny bit more evident than they were when it was just the DACs being used, and so I'm guessing that there's a combination of a little bit of smoothness from the DAC setup and a little bit of smoothness from the headphone stage. And so the MDA1 was just a tiny bit smoother than the DX5, and I'd say that it was also a little tiny bit richer sounding and had a slightly greater sense of mid-range weight, or weight in the central image you could say. And to me, this is proof once again that unbalanced amps are not inferior to balanced amps, or vice versa, balanced amps are not automatically superior to unbalanced amps. Some might argue that the DX5 sounds just a little tiny bit cleaner, and maybe you perceive it as being more detailed than the MDA1, but that's more about the general sound of the amp, and it's less about the fact that it's a balanced design, and more about the fact that they're just different amp designs. But the good thing here for me is that the DX5 doesn't sound clinical, sterile, cold, or unenjoyable. And it might, big emphasis on might, produce ever so slightly wider of a soundstage compared to the MDA1, but by the time I kept switching, it was very hard to tell that. And so I would say that basically these two devices, the SMSL RAW-MDA1 and the Topping DX5 Mark II, are essentially interchangeable, unless you specifically need a feature of one over the other. If you need EQ, you need the Topping DX5. If you need two optical or two coaxial inputs, you're going to have to buy the RAW-MDA1. If you need more power, it's the DX5 again. And so that's really how I would make up my mind between them. If you like the look of one of them better, or you specifically need or prefer the features of one of them better, that's really the point of difference here. Both sound fantastic and have excellent functionality. And now, as for my question about whether or not I'm glad I did this review, yeah, I am. Not because I love the DX5, I think it's fine, I think it's really solid, but because it reminded me again of the importance of thinking about the bigger picture. I've been recommending the SMSL RAW-MDA1 for ages now, but with the DX5 Mark II on the scene, it's just as good and maybe even better for some people. I know that if I had to choose one, it would be the DX5 Mark II. And that's not because it sounds any better, because I don't think it does. It's not because it's got a balanced headphone amp either, or because it's got extra power. None of those things are relevant to me here. I also don't think it looks as good as the SMSL RAW-MDA1. I would choose to use the DX5 Mark II over the RAW-MDA1 because it's just a better interactive experience. Between the menu system and the excellent display, I just think it's a nicer device to use. And that makes the overall listening experience more enjoyable too. And so if you're after a great sounding, affordable DAC and headphone amp, I think the DX5 Mark II is a fantastic choice and possibly the best choice at the price. And so I'll put some links in the description down below where you can pick one up for yourself. But for those wondering, and I know a few of you asked this in the comments before this review, I don't think the DX5 is better than its price would suggest it should be. In other words, it's not beating higher end products. I think the DX5 Mark II is excellent at its price. And so if you want an even better sounding DAC and headphone amp, and you've got a little bit more money to spend, then you're going to want to know what the best product is at the next level up along the same lines as the DX5. And so I've pinned that video here for you at the end. You can take a watch of that one next. But for now, I want to send a huge thanks to YouTube channel members, also to channel Patreon members, and of course to those of you who leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you again soon on Passion for Sound.